Well, tonight, a book that gives a face and voice to the tragic refugee statistics that have dominated much of the news here in Europe. I'm happy to welcome to the show tonight Melissa Fleming. She's here at the big table with me. Melissa, welcome. It's good to have you. It's good to have you with us. Now, but before we talk about your new book, our viewers, they may already be familiar with you. You're a spokesperson for the UN Secretary General, Mr. Guterres.
Well, also for UNHCR. So I've
Yes.
been on the transition team for the UN Secretary General, but I've been spokesperson for UNHCR, the United Nations Refugee Agency, for the past 8 years.
Okay, so so people will automatically associate you with, the situations and trying to deal with refugees. But let's talk about your book. Your latest book is A Hope More Powerful Than the Sea. It has just been released here in Germany as well, in the German language. It's a refugee story of love, loss, and survival. We report more often than we like about people becoming desensitized
That's the issue.
to tragedies, even atrocities. Is there a demand in our world today for the voice of the victims?
Absolutely. I mean, there's this saying, Brent, that goes, statistics are human beings with the tears dried off. And we talk a lot about human beings. Refugees tend to, flee in large numbers. And they become statistics, and people become inured to their suffering. And so for me, to tell Doaa's story, this a single story, it brings people really in. It is engrossing. But it also, through Doaa, through her story, you learn a lot about why the war in Syria started, why it drove so many people, half the population, from their homes, what it was like living as a refugee in neighboring countries, and also what drives people, young people and others, to risk their lives again to cross the Mediterranean Sea to reach the promise of Europe.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in just a moment. But first, we wanted to look at a piece that kind of tells us how the book came into being. Let's take a look.
The sea will never again be a place of enjoyment for Doaa Al Zamel. 2 years ago, the then 19-year-old attempted to cross the Mediterranean to get to Europe. At the book presentation in Berlin, she recounted her ordeal and how the boat she was travelling in was deliberately keeled over by another vessel. To this day, I cannot understand why our boat was willfully capsized and the children allowed to drown. Not even the children were spared. Doaa was one of 11 people who survived. 500 were on the boat. Her fiancé also drowned. Doaa cannot swim and spent 4 days in the sea with an inflatable water ring around her waist, clutching 2 children in her arms. The crew of a tanker ship pulled the 3 of them out of the sea. Only one of the children survived, the 1.5-year-old Massa. The 2 girls in my arms gave me strength. I felt responsible for them. Today, Doaa lives in Sweden. Her siblings and parents were able to emigrate from Syria and travel there. These images from the UNHCR show the moment the family was reunited. Doaa says she's very happy she now lives in Europe. She hopes that one day she'll be able to see her homeland of Syria again.
Melissa, it's a moving story, and it's a story that has a happy ending somewhat. But your book comes at a time when, even your boss, the Secretary General at the UN, is warning of growing hatred towards migrants and refugees all over the world. We had Amnesty International last week talking about the dehumanization of refugees in political rhetoric.
Yes.
What can be done to change this trend?
Well, I mean, the political rhetoric isn't helpful, and I find it completely irresponsible to win votes on the basis of people's fears and the fears of other cultures coming. When it's very irresponsible. I believe most countries, and actually when we do our polling, most citizens of Europe and also the United States, when they know why people are coming, when they know that they're fleeing war, they support almost 100% providing them with asylum. It's when the narrative is distorted, and unfortunately it's too often distorted, that we're seeing so much hatred, we're seeing walls being built, and xenophobia being fueled.
You're speaking to what the German Chancellor Angela Merkel, that was her rationale with her open door policy to let 1 million refugees come into the country. But she is regularly attacked now for that. Donald Trump in the United States, he says that what she did puts the country's security at risk. And that is something, too, that we're seeing a constant fight. Security over humanity.
Well, what the German Chancellor did was the right thing to do. She stands for principles of, letting people who are in need of international protection. And during 2015, when most of the refugees were coming, these were the people from Syria, from Afghanistan, and from Iraq. These were people fleeing terrible conditions in war. What she underestimated was how many would come, and that most would choose to come to 3 countries, Austria, Germany, and Sweden, and that the rest of Europe would say, not our problem. Also, that the European Union was not, at that time, capable of
sharing.
Well, before that, even sharing. The situation, the problem was in Greece, mostly, and also in Italy. And the European Union, we recommended, should have been there immediately with big reception centers, registering the people, screening the people, determining their status, and then setting up a relocation center, a relocation system. We had that already at the beginning. Unfortunately, when it became too late, it became more untenable.
Before we let you go, your experience with refugees, they don't want to leave their homes. And if they do have to leave, they don't want to go far away from home, right?
Yeah, of course not. I mean, do you want to leave your home? It's the worst thing that can happen to you, except losing your family. All refugees I've talked to say this is the absolute last resort when they leave. Many and most people, when they leave, they try not to even leave their country. They try to go to other towns and other villages. Crossing the border into a foreign territory where life is going to be difficult. It is last resort. And all refugees I've talked to mostly also just want to go home. So all that we ask is that if you are unable as countries with influence to stop the wars that are driving so many people, the least you can do is help the victims.
Melissa Fleming, author of this new book. We appreciate you coming in and being on the program.
It's also, there's an English version out.
There's an English version out too, which we showed as well.
Good,
Thank you.
yes.
Melissa, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me on the show.